Alright, tonight we're going to be installing a set of these KYB Gas-Adjust rear shocks in a 2011 Chevy Equinox. Now keep in mind that the process I go through is going to be the same or similar on a lot of other vehicles. So if you're replacing rear shocks on something else, go ahead and watch the video. It may help you out. I want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's taken the time to hit that subscribe button, everyone who gives me that thumbs up, and all the comments and questions that people leave. It's what really keeps me going, so I appreciate everyone who takes the time to do that, okay? Let's go ahead and get started. I know the shocks on this vehicle are shot, and we'll take a look at one close up here when we get it out of the vehicle. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so I went ahead and removed one, and I'll finish this side up, and then we'll do the whole procedure together on the other side. But this is much worse than I thought it was going to be. Look at that. That whole bushing is gone. So essentially a bolt goes through this, and this has been rattling around inside the shock for a while now, I'd say. Okay, and not to mention the shock itself is just dead. Okay, so this is long overdue. So when someone says they hear a funny noise in the back, take the car for a ride yourself sooner than later. I didn't do that, and this is the result, okay? I'm going to get this installed, and then I'm going to start the whole procedure with you, and we're going to get this thing done, and then we'll see what the other side looks like. See if it's as bad as this one, right? Alright, so I have the vehicle up off the ground. It's supported by a jack and a jack stand, and you can see this shock here looks like it's in pretty rough shape. There is an indication that it's been leaking. If it's got a dust coating and you rub that coating and it feels oily, that's because oil has been leaking down out of the shock and then dust collects to it. This shock should have been replaced before this. If you go down the interstate and when you go over an overpass, if the vehicle continues to bounce after you hit that overpass, that bridge, your shocks or your struts need to be replaced. We did the struts last year, and I can link to that video at the end. This plastic fender well needs to come out first. We've got a bunch of these trim buttons, and I've shown these in other videos, and I always recommend buying a bunch of these things, okay? We may break a few getting them out. We've got a couple of Phillips screws here holding the mud flap on. There's a couple of Torx screws as well, okay? Let me get the camera mounted. We'll get this plastic fender well out. We'll take a quick look at the trim button, and I'll link to a bag of those things down below because you should just have some, all right? Alright, so I'll just pull one of these out. I won't waste your time showing all of these, but usually you're going to find a spot where you can slide a screwdriver. Small straight screwdriver. Now the problem with these ones have been outside in the elements, so they're a little bit more flimsy than they probably were when they were new. So on the other side, I did end up breaking a couple of them. You should be able to kind of pry that up, and this one's going to go, okay? Like that. Hopefully I got that on the view. That doesn't necessarily need to come out. And then at that point, this base piece can come out, okay? Like that. Alright, so I thought I'd show another little technique that's been working for me here. If you can't get it with a screwdriver because of the flex in the cap, you could also try a set of needle nose pliers. Get a good grip on the cap itself and kind of pry it, okay? And that's been working for me, and I haven't broken any on this side yet, so guess I should have thought of that on the other side. Sometimes I go a little animal on these things, you know, when I get going. Alright, right down here we have just a couple of screws. That's a Torx, and that is a T20, I believe. My eyes are failing me. And that's the one I broke on the other side. What I tried to do is get it up underneath with some penetrating fluid, and then grab a hold of this with some vice grips, and I ended up breaking it off, okay? And then this is a Phillips, and this should come out. So we'll get these out, and then we'll deal with, there's another Torx right up above here as well. Okay. There's one down here. Okay, we're going to give this a shot. Basically, I have a little bit socket here on a little tiny 1/4-inch breaker bar. And if I can't break it, I'm just going to cut it off. Again, I'm not too worried about it because we can use a trim button, or I could put a larger screw in there. Okay, let's see what happens here. Nope. Alright, right here on the very rear of the fender, we have a little 7mm bolt. We need to remove that. And I did remove the mud flap by removing this little Phillips screw. It's not really necessary, but it was necessary for me to get you a good shot. So I removed the mud flap entirely. It was just one more Phillips screw and it was right here. It's not really necessary, okay? At this point, the entire plastic fender well should be free, only being held in by the front side of the fender. It kind of tucks up under a lip, okay? So let me set the camera down and see if we can get this thing out of here. Actually, I might be able to do it with one hand. Alright. Alright, what we have now is an 8mm bolt on the top and an 8mm bolt on the bottom. The nuts are welded on the backside, so it's not necessary to use a wrench. We're just going to use a ratchet, a socket, and a pipe. I did spray the threads down on the back side of this one. I don't know if I can get you a shot of it or not. Right there. It's been sitting a little bit, but those are apt to be in there pretty good because I live in Maine and they just dump the salt on the roads all winter long, which is why our vehicles are basically falling apart. Alright, let's go ahead and get the camera mount and get this thing out of here. Alright, what I'm going to do is just sort of loosen this bolt up, this bottom one. We're going to break it free, and then we'll move up to the top one. I'm not going to remove this bottom bolt entirely until we get the top out, okay? And I'm going to use Old Faithful here, this pipe. I've used it in several other videos. It's actually two pipes, one pounded into the other because I think the first one started to bend. Okay, it fits perfectly over this ratchet handle, and what that does for us is it just gives us additional torque, right? Because then when you apply pressure, I'm coming all the way out to the end of the bar. Okay, that gives us more leverage. Okay, so now obviously you want to make sure that the socket is on the bolt head squarely. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, let's see if we can do it without the pipe. Alright, we'll do the same thing here with the top 18mm bolt. Make sure that the socket is on squarely. We'll slide our pipe onto the ratchet. Okay, and I'm going to grab a hold of the very end of the pipe, which you probably can't see. And we're going to try to break it free. That wasn't too bad either. That one's actually better than the bottom one, probably because it's a little bit more protected from the salt. Okay, we'll remove this top bolt, and then we'll go down and remove the bottom bolt. I should mention, too, that I like to have two jacks. It's not entirely necessary, but it definitely makes it easier to line the top portion of the shock up when we on the reinstallation. Okay, so what I did there was just bring my jack up just a little bit, and that took the pressure. The weight of the control arm was pulling down on the bolt, preventing me from getting it out easily, and that took care of it, okay? Let's move back down to the bottom one. Alright. At this point, I'm going to lower my jack a little bit more. We'll drop the control arm. I don't know if you can see it going down or not. Just goes down a little bit more. We can actually compress the shock with one hand here, and it does not spring back up. At least the whole top bushing's not completely blown out of it, but it's definitely not good. Okay, so look at this thing. Okay, let's go ahead and get the new one. Alright, let's just talk real quick about the installation. It's not really necessary to do it this way, but I always install the shocks the same way. Creature of habit. They usually come compressed with a band like this. I'm going to get the lower bolt in and threaded, not fully tightened. And then I'll cut the band, and I usually guide the shock up and control the expansion, and then I'll catch the top bolt at the right time. Now, this vehicle has enough play, down travel, with the control arm that we don't need to do that. In fact, on the other side, I had to use my jack to lift it up to get the bolt in. But that's typically how I will install a shock. And you may run into that where you cut the band and the shock travels up beyond the bolt hole, and then you're trying to compress the brand new shock. Incidentally, these KYB shocks, this particular one, these Gas-Adjust, these are supposed to compensate for a worn spring or worn suspension components, so they'll be a little bit more stiff than the factory. I've never installed them. Hopefully they'll provide a good ride. I'll link to these as well as some inexpensive options or a little bit less expensive options down below. Alright, so let's go ahead and get these installed. I'll run through it the way I just explained, although it's not really necessary on this vehicle. We'll do it that way anyways, because you may be doing it on a different vehicle. Okay, make sure you always get your bolts started by hand first so that you don't cross-thread anything. And of course we sprayed down the threads on the bolt as well as on the back side, the threaded piece on the back side. And I'm just going to get the bolt wound in to where it essentially meets up with the mount, but I'm not going to tighten any further beyond that because I really do want it to be loose like this, okay? Alright, so let me just see if I can demonstrate what I was just talking about. Again, it's not really necessary on this, but just keep in mind that it's easier to hold the shock back from expanding than it is to compress it. So what we do is essentially cut the band. Okay, and then on the travel up, we guide it to the point where it would meet the bolt hole, okay? But now on this vehicle, we have to use a jack. But I have run into that before where the control arm didn't have enough play or enough lower travel, downward travel, I guess I should say. Oh, we lost our light. Okay, so we're just using our lower jack to raise the control arm to the point where we can actually get the bolt threaded. Okay, so now we need to torque each of these bolts down to 81 foot-pounds. Alright, we're going 81 foot-pounds on top and bottom here, okay? Hey, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give me that thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. If you want to see more of this type of thing, I do ATV repair, auto repair, home improvement, electrical work. I clean my own boiler, you name it. I've got a lot of videos. Check them out. Also, leave questions and comments down below. I always appreciate feedback, positive, negative. Next thing we need to do here, and I'm not going to show it as I'm just going to reverse order. All you need to do is reinstall your plastic fender well. I'm going to include a link to trim buttons down below, as well as this shock and other shock options for this vehicle. Thanks for watching. Have fun, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. All right, have fun.